Okay, without further ado, I'm asking forward to the stage the first project. You have about 5 minutes, and then what we'll be doing in the Q&A and discussion is mostly for everyone else who wasn't part of the project to help figure out how one could possibly advance that project. And so many of you here, I think, had the problem that they wanted to join more than one group. And so it's a good time to help that group along that you weren't able to join, because I think ultimately we all have relatively shared goals here amongst ourselves in the very long run. And so we can make this a little bit of a collaborative peer review, but also just like seeing how we can help each other. And then we'll be doing the Q&A for each project. We will be moseying our way down the line. And then finally, after this, we'll be voting with Feynman price dollars, Feynman bucks. And we do a public vote on the projects that you think were really wonderful. And so afterwards, we'll be giving 1, 2, and 3K in development grants. Obviously, this won't get us all the way to space, but they're mostly to kind of like just incentivize work post this workshop, so that we don't go home and like into our respective silos again, but that we're actually able to potentially accomplish something together here that has a little bit more hand and foot rather than just a workshop. And there's also lots of other potential support that we could offer. For example, future more focused follow-on workshops, which we've done in many of our other focus areas, like in biotech, for example. We usually have one big workshop that then spirals into more focused specific workshops on autophagy or what have you. And the same could be done for this. We have fellowships, we have prizes as a vehicle that we could be doing, and the virtual seminars as well, to just further develop some of these ideas, potentially off the record, with a much larger group that are in our seminar group list. So those are just like a few ways I think of like how we can help, and I'll be kind of following up with people after the workshop to see how we can help you guys get this into a stage where we can really like make these projects flourish for those who have an interest in actually pursuing them. And I also want to welcome you as we go through this to also think about who is not here today who would be really useful for this project. Obviously, this is like a 2-day event. Not everyone can be here. And it's our first of this kind. And so we're hoping to do many, many more. Or it's our first in 20 years of this kind for space. And so if there's other people in here that you think about, feel free to just like note down their name. And we can make sure that if it's useful, we reach out to them and draw them in. Okay, that's just a little bit of stage setting. But now I want to ask to the stage, without further ado, and with handheld mics, project group 1, which consisted of Robert, Creon, Mike McCulloch, Austin, and Larry.
I think Austin didn't make it.
Okay, then we can delete Austin from.
Another person who wasn't. Was it you?
Feel free to just Jeffrey.
Geffen.
GFF.
Yeah.
EAT.
EN.
E.
Yes.
Okay, Geffen. Sorry. Okay, wonderful. Then without further ado, I'm going to ask the stage the first group. Feel free to all come up if you want to fill in. Just make sure that you hold some of those mics. And that was mostly focused on technological progress and slash institutes to make progress on those. So without further ado, take it away. And you have about 5 minutes to just walk us through what you discussed, how is it done today, and so forth.
Well, I've tried to write in complete sentences as requested what we discussed. And so I think that I would summarize that as to say we had 2 exemplars in our group of a more general situation, but we focused on the 2 exemplars. We had Robert Zubrin, who can describe the thing that he's trying to set up, and we had Mike McCulloch to describe the thing he's trying to set up, and they're similar, and the similarities are grouped in the first bullet there. So, Bob, what are you trying to set up?
Well,
and why?
We're trying to set up a Mars Technology Institute that will develop technologies that are necessary for the settlement of Mars, and which will become self-funding because we're going to be focusing on technologies that, while necessary for the settlement of Mars, can spin off for terrestrial applications and thus generate cash income, and thus the operation becomes self-funding, and in ideal circumstances becomes so self-funding that it can fund the settlement of Mars. And then you?
Yeah. So I'm trying to set up a Horizon Institute to work on both the theory and applications of quantized inertia. Again, as Roberts, it would become self-funding in about 2 years, is the plan, by various means. And it would aim to improve satellite thrusters with the theory, replace them. And then a second project would be an Oort cloud mission in about a year, and a third mission many years later would be an interstellar mission. Just a demonstration to show it can be done with a very small CubeSat, so other people can then do it again.
Okay, so then one thing we came to realize is that these kinds of projects, which are either a longer time horizon or perhaps a little more speculative / ambitious than your average commercial venture, or even venture capital funded venture, or even unfortunately government funded venture, the source for bootstrapping these things before they become self-funding might have to be non-standard. It might have to be crowdfunding. That has disadvantages because it's a lot of small amounts. It could be philanthropic, large donations from an interested person who has enough money and wants some glory. Kind of Yuri Milner is an example of such a person, but he's got his own glory projects going. And the problem there that we discussed was that, a lot of times if you have one angel, then if the angel wants veto power over this, that, and the other thing, micromanagement issues.
Well, that's glory for you.
That's what? Oh, that's glory for you. So another thing we talked about, of course, is the possibility of crypto funding, because
Alice in Wonderland.
There's a bunch of people who are already kind of, I think, how can I say it, a bit revolutionary in their tendencies, and they aren't necessarily quite so traditional as VC firms or traditional philanthropists. So there's, the question is always how to get the money and what are the trades and all this. So let's see. I guess it's all just kind of self-explanatory from the text. I don't know how much there. I don't want to read.
Yeah, but read it because
we're illiterate, Creon.
What?
We're illiterate.
All right. So
what does success look like?
Okay, well, we just told you that. You mean the particular things we proposed?
What does success look like?
Well, there's different horizons for success. Like.
All right. Well, okay. For us, the minimal level of success would be that establish the institute, that it creates at least one significant invention that's useful towards the settlement of Mars, and that it generates enough income to keep funding further research. That would be the minimum criteria for success. Obviously, we don't need to develop all the technology necessary for the settlement of Mars. No one institution is going to do that. But to make a material contribution and become self-funding. And then, of course, the maximum criteria for success is we develop a good deal of the technology necessary for the settlement of Mars, as well as the income necessary. In other words, we create both an invention engine and a financial engine supporting the settlement of Mars. That would be success with the 5 stars. And we get glory.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe we can also discuss a little bit more about either what does it cost, how long would it take, any next steps.
Well, because there are so many different gates and levels for success, both of the sample projects had different success milestones. Not even milestones, like you could have success and then bigger success and then bigger success. Okay, so we already discussed both of those. But I think that I'd like to, and since they both kind of try and become economically self-sustaining, hopefully in reasonably short order, maybe the initial success gates are not that far away. Now, we did come up with the risks question. There are We didn't actually come up with any serious risks that are not the same risks that every other project has, like risk of failure, risk of reputational damage if you don't succeed, risk of setting back the field if you don't succeed, and risk of dual use. You know, some of these things can be, like any other technology, these things can be used for good or ill. And so
there's a small risk that quantized inertia could turn a Milky Way galaxy into a black hole.
And okay,
1%.
maybe as a final question, what would your next steps look like if you were awarded a 1K, 2K, or 3K?
right, well, so our next, we kind of came up with a thing at the very end. It happens that we had Geffen, who has a small nanosat bus company that's sort of looking for some interesting payloads. And we have a Mike who's got a potentially very interesting payload that could fit in 1U. And although there's another company kind of doing this, they're not being very transparent about it. They're not really being forthcoming about what they're flying, even though they're flying something based on his theories. And so we also have a person in our team, Larry, who is quite capable at building small spacecraft components and general purpose engineer, mechanical, electrical, et cetera. And so we were
All
thinking,
of which I stole from Planet Labs, by the way. In the spirit of full transparency.
no, he had been doing a lot of spacecraft stuff before Planet Labs. But be that as it may, I think that we, for a few K, we might actually be able to build a version of Mike's thing, of which has already been built at several labs, but qualify it for space and ship it to Geffen's group that is looking for interesting payload and get it launched. This might actually be doable for that budget. So it's not just a report or a video, it's an actual demonstration.
Wow, awesome. Thank you, guys. Stay up here for just a second. Questions, comments? Anything you'd like to tell them in terms of questions, useful remarks, helpful comments, people that they should be talking to? Rand, you go first.
Yeah, Mars is unique, has some unique characteristics in terms of the soil, the atmosphere, and so on. But how many of these could be spun off to other, locations for space settlement?
Well, in principle, you could have one dedicated to the moon and so forth, but I view Mars as a much more promising location to develop settlement for a large number of people, because the materials are there: carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen.
No, that wasn't my question.
But yes, but in principle, you could do this for other places.
But that's not my question. How many of the things that you would develop for Mars would be useful other places?
Well,
let me answer that for a moment. The idea of this is that that this place would develop things that are useful for Mars, that are also useful for Earth, because that's kind of...
yes, that's where most of the customers are, yeah. The idea is we would generate inventions that are useful for Mars that have the potential to be licensed for application on Earth to generate income. Okay, now some of these inventions conceivably could be useful for the moon as well. The three main areas that we're initially going to focus on are robotics, biotechnology, and energy. Certainly, there's going to be a labor shortage at a lunar base too, and so forth. But anyway, that's what it's about.
Okay.
I wanted to ask, or comment really, I think that the fundamental job of the people at that institute will actually bear an enormous resemblance to the job of a venture capitalist attempting to select technologies for investment that can go on to have an economic life, right? That's a lot. I think of there was a VC firm down in LA called Mars Bio, and trying to invest on the thesis of technology, biotech technology in particular, that could be extensible to Mars and have an economic life here on Earth. So I think that it might be wonderful to talk to those guys and ask them about their experience attempting to sort of find and cultivate these ideas that are out there. And I happen to know one, and I'd be happy to introduce you to him. He's currently working in Oakland, one of their former VCs.
All right, sounds good.
Awesome, very helpful. Well done, Mike. Okay, final question.
Yes. Quick question. I'm confused. The 3K, this is for Mike, by the way. The 3K development grant, will it include the development of Horizon Drive as well? Or is it something that you already have and you just need to put it on a payload and launch?
Yes, we have. There are 4 labs who have been building Horizon drives, and some of them are further along than others. So we could select the best. And
Well, okay, we can talk about this offline.
yeah, okay, it hasn't.
It's not developing it, it's building a test unit.
That's space qualified, that will fit into the volume.
Yes, true.
And ready for integration by the end of the year.
Okay, wonderful, you guys. Thank you.